All right, it's official. And the discussion that we've been in is the very challenging discussion of when do you challenge a wicked person? When do you challenge somebody? When do you stand up to people who are pursuing a wicked agenda? And we have, as one of the many teachings of Rabbi Yitzchak, this was the last one that we came upon, where he says, watch out. Don't challenge a wicked person when they're on a roll. And then we struggled with that, and we saw that there were other sages that said no. And challenging a person is something that really needs to be considered in order for justice to be done, or in order for society to be a good society. We looked at some of the nuances that were in that discussion. Rabbi Yochanan doesn't say you are obligated to challenge the wicked person. Rabbi Yochanan said it's permissible to challenge a wicked person, meaning it's leaving it up to the person to decide, is this for me or not? Is it worth it at this moment? What are the costs involved? Who am I jeopardizing? Am I only jeopardizing myself? Am I willing to take this burden on for myself because it's my business? Or on behalf of the society, I'm willing to become a martyr if necessary. What about everybody else that I'm connected to? All of these kinds of very hard decisions are left open by Rabbi Yochanan, but he's totally not saying what Rabbi Yitzchak said, which is don't do it. Steer away. Just go hide someplace. Wait for the evil to blow over. Maybe it'll take a few hundred years. Maybe it'll take another generation, but it's none of your business. So Rabbi Yitzchak's point is very troubling, and the Gemara brings up other distinctions. Anybody remember another distinction? We had at least another two distinctions that were made. Oh, you're making a lot of noise.
I know I said in the intro that Senator Bernie Sanders
Bernie Sanders is trying to get on? That's what I heard. So Bernie Sanders would actually benefit from this conversation. So, all right. The two distinctions that I can recall are, one is, what is this confrontation that you're pursuing? Is it about something that this wicked person is doing against you personally? Or is it something that's beyond your own personal problem? It's about something bigger than you, right? Something that's affecting society, something that's affecting another human being, something that's affecting other people. Moses, when we're introduced to Moses as an adult, what's the first thing that we have Moses do? Right? He stands up for another person who's being beaten up by the Egyptian taskmaster, and he ends up killing that Egyptian taskmaster to protect somebody else, not himself. He was completely not in danger. So if Rabbi Yitzchak's directive applied to him, then it would be, Moses, just mind your own business. Just keep walking along, right? No, Moses does it because it's not about me. It's about somebody else. For me, I can, quote unquote, turn the other cheek. If it's me, I can decide whether I can put up with this or not. But it's not about me. It's about somebody else. So that was one distinction that was made. The other distinction that was made was, how much of a tzaddik are you? You're attacking this wicked person. Are you so great? Are you so terrific? You know, are you just as, you know, are you what's the phrase? You know, if you're living in a glass house, watch it. If there are things that are going to come up about you that you have to answer for, so what are you doing attacking somebody else? Only when you are, when you have the moral higher ground, that's when you can attack the wicked and assume that your attack is for righteous motives, for a righteous agenda. Otherwise, we have too many times, let's, the gang leaders, one gang leader kills the other gang people, and then the other gang leaders kill the other gang people. So each one is killing another murderer, but they're but that's still being murderers, right? So it's not like they're standing up against wickedness. They just don't like this other person. All right, so that's what we had until now. Now we're at 6b3, 6b2. I'm sorry. On the left-hand column, the last 3 lines. We have one more answer that is offered by the Talmud to explain where Rabbi Yitzchak's cautionary advice might apply, and it's short and very disturbing. Who's reading for us today? Carol, thank you. There you go.
So you don't want to pick up where we ended. You want to...
Where did we end?
We ended with the word wicked. So there was a paragraph above those 3 lines.
Oh, look at that. I thought we finished that. I'm sorry. Okay, good. So let's start from, to get the whole thing, let's go from an alternative answer, whatever, it's like 5 lines from the top.
Okay.
Thank you.
An alternative answer, and if you prefer, say that both this, the statement of Yitzhak, and this, the Baraita, speak in reference to one's personal affairs, and yet no difficulty is posed by the disparity of their rulings, because this, the Baraita, which permits one to contend with the wicked, speaks in reference to one who is utterly righteous. Whereas this, the statement of Rabbi Yitzhak, which prescribes antagonizing...
Proscribes, let's be clear, proscribes, forbids.
Which prescribes antagonizing the wicked, speaks in reference to one who is not utterly righteous. That is, all agree that only a truly righteous person is allowed to contend with the wicked.
Okay, so that's what I was saying a minute ago. But now we have this extra explanation. Go ahead.
This distinction is borne out by the following teaching. For Rav Huna said, "What is the meaning of that which is written? Why do you look upon them that deal treacherously and remain silent when the wicked swallow up one who is more righteous than he?" The verse implies that a wicked person can swallow one who is merely more righteous than himself, but he cannot swallow one who is completely righteous.
Okay, so that's the distinction that's being made. It's as I said, I made that distinction in my own words. Here we have an editorial statement. All agree that only a truly righteous person is allowed to contend with the wicked. How's that sound? Jennifer, come on, speak up.
It's problematic because, so we never protest until we've achieved perfection and enlightenment. The U.S. should never have gotten involved in World War II when we had so many of our own injustices and illegalities. I mean, if we all wait until we've crossed over to the other shore and are perfect, then, we're leaving a horrific world.
Yeah, anybody else? Yeah, I mean, you said it. But I think that we have to understand, again, the context that this statement is being made. It's being made in a private dispute, right? It's made once somebody else is being affected by this wickedness, then this distinction doesn't apply. So once other people are in trouble, or other people are being oppressed, or other people are being mistreated, then you don't have to be a card-carrying member of the 36 righteous people to start fighting, right? So, that's at least a mitigating factor here. So the examples that you give are examples where we're talking about broad problems. that are
So
affecting a lot of other people. Yeah.
does that mean you can't stand up for yourself, even if you're not a perfect human being? If you're the one who's being affected, that still
So
seems very problematic to me.
that's
I
so good.
can never
So
stand up to my boss.
I wanted to clarify that, but then I want to come back. Now we're getting clear. Yes, I think that what you're saying now needs to be struggled with also. Go ahead.
So my boss is and this is not my case. I have a wonderful boss right now, but say I didn't, and I'm being basically, in one sense or another, abused by the boss. I am also an incredibly imperfect person who has been known to take advantage of other people. Does that mean I can't stand up for my rights against my boss? I mean, that seems like it's okay. If I were also taking advantage of her, then she could call me out on it and, whatever. But I don't think that it negates my ability to stand up for myself just because I have not crossed over to the far shore. I mean, it's,
That's your opinion.
Yeah.
That's I think that other people would say, no. I think you're completely righteous. It's okay.
Well, but that's
let's without the kidding, without all that stuff. I think that this is the really hard point. I think Jennifer is raising a very, very important question for us. Yeah, Stuart.
Yeah, I just think that most of us tend to be rather bad judges of our own character. Maybe as hard as it is to judge others, it's particularly hard to judge ourselves. So, a person who's really self-critical, who really is looking hard at themselves, might say, "Well, I'm not there yet, so I have to refrain." Somebody who is less self-critical, I mean, there's a difficulty in knowing whether you're in that category or not.
Right. What about if we try to limit it to the particular problem itself? Your boss is treating you badly, and saying, get this work done, and so on and so forth. Let's keep it simplistic, and let's say actually you're not the best worker in the world. Would that soften this up a little bit? Would that make a little bit of a difference? Yeah.
I think it still depends. So there's established rights in a workplace. So the boss has a right to write you up for the work you're not doing, but the boss can't arbitrarily say, I need you for 4 extra hours today, or I need you to work through the weekend if that's not part of your established contract. So, those are two different things. So then you just take each infraction as it is. So you might get written up for not doing the work, but that still doesn't give you, the boss, the right to retain you for the weekend when that's not part of what you're being paid for.
Right. Okay. Let's go now to the last few lines, and then we can circle it back and see if these few lines modify or readjust some of the stuff that we've been thinking about. Okay, Beryl, an alternative answer.
An alternative answer. And if you prefer, say that when the wicked person enjoys good fortune, the situation is different. Rav Yitzchak forbids antagonizing the wicked only in the case of a wicked person who is enjoying success. Otherwise, he agrees with the Baraita that it is permissible.
So now this is, I would suggest, a statement that takes us out of the question of moral considerations. Am I as good as I can be? Is who's being hurt here? How grave is the injustice that we're talking about? All of those moral calculations are being now dispensed with, and instead, what do we have? What is this? What is this suggested understanding?
Seems like a pragmatic consideration.
Yeah, it's just tough-nosed advice. That watch it. This guy has so much power, has so much going for him. He will just steamroll over you. You may be totally right. You may be entitled. Your rights are clear to anybody who's a decent human being. But this guy really is a wicked person. And guess what? He's on a roll. He's absolutely succeeding. And you're not going to be able to push him aside. So in your boss scenario, if there's no way, I'll go to your higher up, go to the person on top of it. No, if that boss is like really securely ensconced in their position, then the question is, what are you going to get out of it? Now, again, that's not the end of the story, but it is saying we can agree that morally something terrible is happening here. What do you do about it? Now, what Rabbi Yitzchak says is don't confront the wicked person. Let's take one of the classic situations that has come up now. Let's take Me Too, right? Let's take a Me Too kind of collection of cases. In many of those cases, either people have been totally too afraid to confront the wicked person, or they actually did try to do something about it, and the wicked person was on a roll. The wicked person was being excused. The wicked person was being protected. Everybody else was afraid of the wicked person. They got away with this stuff for years, maybe, right, and multiple times. What was in the end the way that Me Too breaks open was not because somebody went over to Harvey Weinstein and slapped him in the face. It wasn't about directly confronting the wicked person. How did Me Too actually end up getting traction? Is by going out of confronting Harvey Weinstein and bringing it into the public, right? So maybe what he's saying then would be, you have to be very, very shrewd about how you're going to fight this. If you think you're going to go one-on-one against this wicked person, think again. There are other strategies that might be open. There are other ways that you're going to need to try to get this done. And then all of the other moral calculations that we have can then actually work to your advantage. If you can get other people to be outraged about what is being done to other oppressed people, then the power of people's righteous indignation becomes enhanced. If it's not just my personal agenda, if it's not just my being upset with what you did to me, then maybe there's a better chance for something to work out. One way to look at it, right? That don't slug it out with the wicked person. Find some other way to get the wicked person to be tripped up. Be careful though, because as he says, we're talking about a wicked person who is at this point in their life and career very, very successful, right? They're doing okay, right? Yeah, Josie.
Is successful a synonym for powerful?
I think successful, in any way that is meaningful to the situation. I think that in successful monetarily and otherwise it goes right along with power. I don't think that power can be taken out of this at all. I don't think a wicked person who has no power is not going to be on a roll, right? That's one of the horrifying things that's going on today. Is you have all these actually bad people who are coming out of the woodwork because now the kind of social media reality that we live in gives people power that they never would have had. You need the power. Without power, you're not going to be able to be to do harm. You can't do harm without power. So this is the chilling realpolitik question that's being raised by Rabbi Yitzchak. Okay, any other comments on this topic? All right, so now we're going to go to the last paragraph, which is a continuation back to the ideas that we had before of identifying geographic locations. right? We were trying to have, all kinds of discussions. What place is this? What place is this? Is this a place that you read Megillah on the 15th or on the 14th? But as a result, we have all of these place names that are mentioned. And then the question is that what place name from the old days, what place today that we recognize is it? So we had all kinds of different things. So now we have a little riff, a little improvisation, so to speak, on one particular place. And let's see if we can see what this has to do with, or if not, with the rest of what we've studied before we get to the next Mishnah. So this is Ula. Okay.
Ula said, Italia of Yavan, this is the great city of Rome.
Okay, Yavan usually means Greece. So we've got a mix here of the Italy of Greece is the great city of Rome. Okay.
It measures 300 parsa by 300 parsa, and it has 365 marketplaces, corresponding to the number of days in the solar year. The smallest of all the marketplaces is that of the poultry vendors, and it measures 16 mil by 16 mil. Every day the king dines in one of them, and everyone who lives in the city, even if he was not born there, takes a stipend from the king's palace. And similarly, everyone who was born in the city, even if he does not live there, takes a stipend from the king's palace. There are 3,000 bathhouses.
Yeah, let's not exaggerate here. Let's be come on.
And 500 windows direct the smoke upwards away from the city walls. One side of the city is bounded by the ocean, and one side by mountains and hills. One side by a barrier of iron, and one side by pebbly ground and a swamp. Based on this inference, the Gemara notes that our Mishnah is at variance with the opinions of...
Wait a second. Where are you?
I'm not in the right place.
In the swamp, and period.
Okay.
Right? Where's that based on what? I don't know where that based on is from.
Isn't that the next sentence?
No. And one side by pebbly ground and a swamp. Period.
Okay.
I don't know what you got there. Okay. That's the end of this part of the Gemara, and the next line is a new Mishnah. So anyway, okay. So now we have an identification of Italy of Greece is the big city of Rome. Okay, so just to what we have here is a kind of a shorthand, mythic, fairy tale-y collapsing of history. The Greeks came first, the Romans came second. Right? Italy was a backwater when Greece was a world power, but then it was slowly settled and built up. And so what Ula is saying is what originally was called this little Italy, not little Italy, but this little thing that the Greeks, this little colony that the Greeks, were supporting. Guess what it is today? Guess what it is today? Today, it's none other than the, huge, capital of the world, Rome itself. And then what he gives you this kind of like exaggerated. That's why I was saying let's not exaggerate. He gives you this like over the top kind of depiction of its opulence and how everybody there, when we used to talk about it, the America, the streets are paved with gold and everybody comes here and they make money, hand over fist, and all the stores are amazing and all of this and all of that. So you have here a picture of clearly of great wealth, of great comfort, of great luxury, and luxury that appeals also to the kind of like sybaritic enjoyments, bathhouses all over the place. It's amazing. and they're so careful about how they keep the city beautiful. The windows that let out the steam. God forbid that the pollution, the air pollution, should dirty the walls of their buildings. Everything is about beauty and money and eating and physical comfort. That's Rome. And it sits in such an amazing place. It's got beaches and it's got mountains in the background and it's got the ocean. What do we say? What do we think a barrier of iron is? Right? When he says, and this is what it is. One side is surrounded by ocean, one side by mountains and hills, one side by a barrier of iron, and one side by pebbly ground and a swamp.
Iron could be the wall. A wall.
Okay. Well, but the walls they would build usually out of stone. I think this is. Yeah, I think we're talking about the Iron Curtain. We're talking about the military power of Rome. That this is a wall of soldiers, of armor, of all of the instruments of war that Rome was using to take over the world, right? So and the last thing that it is pebbly ground and swamp. What do we make of that? Something that needs to be drained, to coin a phrase, right? Swamps are not great. Swamps are not human beings' favorite places, right? So there's a kind of it ends with this kind of like ickiness about it. First, it's glittering and it's beautiful and it's it's amazing and so opulent, and yet it's right next to a swamp. Sylvia, yeah.
Yeah, no, it makes me think that this is a city that is not self-sufficient for food and things like that, and depends on all those whom they depend on, however they conquer them.
Right, interesting, right? So all of these markets that are selling stuff and people are eating like crazy, but it's not, it's not a town situated, it's not a city situated near a whole bunch of agricultural stuff. It's surrounded by other kinds of natural phenomena, and basically you have to go out and get the food from someplace else, which is part of what Rome does, right? Rome is constantly expanding and conquering and taking over. So everything else, and of course, the Jewish people are well aware of the power of Rome, right? So besides this as being another final example of taking an earlier name for a place and applying the new modern name to it, is there any other possible flow through of having this last piece be here after everything else that we've read?
Yeah, it seems like the triumph of evil is that Rome is the most powerful place on earth, and it's full of pagans and other evoldoers.
Right. So I think precisely. I think what we have here is, you want an example of a wicked person who's on a roll. You want an example of a Rasha that the time is working in their favor and everything is great. Here's the example right in front of us. It's Rome, right? This is not. It sounds like a glowing report about how wonderful Rome is, but it's in the context. Everybody knows, yes, this place is very successful and very powerful, as Josie points out, and yet it's really backed up by a swamp. And the ultimate. So there are two implications, right? One implication is, don't mess with Rome right now, right? Don't mess with Rome, because Rome will not let you get away with it. So that's Rabbi Yitzchak's warning. When the wicked are on a roll, hold your fire. So that could be just a basic, quietistic piece of advice now, and we know, as I said, we know. Look, we rebelled against Rome in 68. We paid the price in 70 with the destruction of everything. We rebelled against Rome again in 115. Just a generation or two after that, and that was a rebellion that was all over the place, not just in actually not in the land of Israel, but in the diaspora. And we paid the price again. We got decimated. The Jewish community in Alexandria never recovered, and so on. So, we just need to know that they are wicked, absolutely true. And what are we going to do about it? Right now, they're on a roll. But the implication is, but they're not going to be on a roll forever. Yeah, Sylvia.
Yeah, but there's also the indication that the citizenry is indebted to the king, the powerful king, which that the king has bought their favor.
Absolutely, bread and circuses, right? Exactly.
And what could be more evil than that?
Right. Yep. So it ends with a little bitter note here, the end of this particular Talmudic discussion, right? A kind of a reality check that we're not in such a good world right now. That's the end at this point. Okay, now we go to the next Mishnah. So Josie, yeah.
I was going to say, I know this is anathema for a lot of people, but I think our love of organized sports is bread and circuses to distract us from the real issues of our country.
Let's see what happens as the pandemic keeps on going. We'll see. I think clearly sports has taken a huge clobbering. I mean, I don't know how it's working out now in terms of what the viewership is and all that kind of stuff. Does anybody know what's going on?
Well, they keep bemoaning the fact that sports are being canceled, like it's the most important thing in our society.
Right. But as again, to your point, what's happening now is that our society is somehow or other adjusting. Unless they're playing video games and fantasy football.
Right.
I mean, sports.
Yeah, I was going to say, we all have a Switch now. I mean,
But
we all have a Nintendo Switch now, so it's not the disaster.
not all of us. Not all of us.
If you don't now, just give it a couple more months of a pandemic, and you will.
Right. Yeah. But I think we're gonna see how's this gonna. Everybody's wondering about everything. How's this gonna change our habits about our leisure life in general and going about town and all kinds of stuff? How's it going to change our habits in terms of making space for sports? I have no idea. Yeah, we'll see. Okay, so Beryl, do you have the same page that I have?
I have 6B3.
No, we're on 6B2.
Then I can't read because my next page is 6B3.
No, but the bottom of 6B2. You don't have.
Oh, okay. I see what you've got.
Okay.
You don't. The last thing I said was swamp.
Right. So that was the end of the discussion of the previous Mishnah, and now we have the next Mishnah. Okay. So
And that's not on the next page?
And then it continues through into the next page. Right, so the Mishnah is whatever it is, 8 lines of Mishnah, and then the Gemara is another 4 lines at the bottom of 6B2. Yes.
So I should find this on 6B2 or on 6B3?
6B2.
Okay.
Where it says Mishnah, big letter.
All right, I got it. In a
Okay?
leap year, a second month of Adar is added. The Mishnah discusses in which month of Adar, the first or the second, the Megillah is read. If they had read the Megillah in the first Adar, and subsequently an extra month of Adar was added to the year, they must read it again in the second Adar. The Mishnah proclaims the following rule. There is no difference between the first Adar and the second Adar, except in respect to reading the Megillah and gifts for the poor.
Okay. So now we have 2 pieces of this in this Mishnah. We have one specific ruling that is given in the first half of the Mishnah, and then we have a kind of a general reflection in the second part of the Mishnah. The Mishnah's topic is, what do we do when we have two Adars? Until now, we've been talking about 1 month of Adar. We have the celebration of Purim, and we've been struggling with what day should it be, and which places celebrated in which day, and all that kind of stuff. So we've been, going around in all kinds of different conversations about that. Now we get one more complication. Guess what? Sometimes there's more than one Adar. What happens? So the idea is that what a leap year, we, most of us, I think, have already heard this kind of explanation. But just to make sure, a leap year in the regular calendar that we use, the Gregorian calendar, is once every 4 years we add 1 day to February, right? In the Jewish calendar, it's different. So, and the leap year is always to make some kind of little adjustment because our mathematical system is not a perfect fit with nature. So we don't quite have a full year, let's say a solar year. It's 365 days and plus, so many minutes and hours or whatever it is. And after a while, that little extra piece builds up. So every 4 years, the amount of time that has built up that's extra needs to be accounted for, and we put in a whole new day. So that's when we do a solar adjustment. When we do in the Hebrew calendar our adjustments are more complicated, because our adjustments are that we're adjusting a lunar calendar to a solar rhythm. So the lunar calendar is 354 days, but 365 days is a solar calendar. Why do we have to adjust to the solar calendar? Because we have to keep our holidays in the right season. So Ramadan, for instance, has no such limitation. So Ramadan every year is in another place in the calendar. And eventually, if you wait long enough, you'll be able to see Ramadan in the summer, in the winter, in the fall, in the spring. Ramadan happens whenever it happens, because it just keeps sliding along. It has nothing to do with the seasons. But our tradition says, no, Passover has to be a spring holiday, and Sukkot has to be a fall holiday. So we can't afford to let these holidays slide. And the sliding is not a tiny little bit of a few minutes or a few hours. Every year we slide by 11 days. Every year we slide the difference between 365 days and 354 days. That's why every year for a while, the Jewish holidays, we talk about, oh, they're early this year. Oh, they're late this year. Why are they early or late? Because let's say they start late. The following year, they'll be 11 days earlier. And the following year after that, they'll be another 11 days earlier. So after a couple of years, they're 3 weeks earlier than they were back in when they were late, right? So then every 2 or 3 years, sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 2, we add a month to the calendar, because either we're losing 22 days from already, or we lose 33 days already, right? So 11 days, and then another 11 days, and then another 11 days. So we add a month 7 times. I'm sorry, is it 7 times in 19 years? So sometimes it's after 2 years, and sometimes it's after 3 years. Okay, so this is mathematically worked out, so you can look it up in the calendar. And just to tell you in a half a second here, this coming year will not be a leap year, right?
Not.
Probably the year after that will be a leap year. I could look it up. Yes, Josie.
You said the reason we do this is to keep our holidays in the proper season.
Right.
What about keeping us in sync with the society around us? I thought that's why we did this.
That's their problem. The society around us should be in sync with us, not we with them.
I see.
So The Torah is not. The Torah keeps on warning us: don't try to be in sync with the society around you. Right? Just make sure that you keep your rhythm of serving God according to our rhythm. Right? Of course, what I'm being a little facetious, but not totally. Right? And of course, this creates a tremendous problem. Right? We know this. Anybody that lives in their general world has all kinds of problems of living Jewish time. You know that every week we've got a problem. Right? What do we do at Shabbos? So Jewish time is a problem when it's not the general time. That's one of the amazing things about Israel. When you live in Israel, you live Jewish time. Yeah, Jennifer.
I was just going to comment, the two of us in my school system who are Jewish, like,
Yeah.
had our own private dance party over the fact that Rosh Hashanah fell on a Saturday and Sunday, which means like we get 2 extra personal days basically for the year. Yeah,
So,
super exciting.
A socially distanced dance party, yes?
Yes. Yeah, well, we were in different offices, so.
All right, good. Yeah, I mean, look, we struggle with this all the time. What do you do with the schools? What do you do with the business? All that kind of stuff. Yes, when you're a minority with a different way of marching your life rhythm, very, very hard, very hard. Anyway, now, so the month that we add, when do we add this month? Do we add this month arbitrarily any place we want? Just like with February, it's always February in the leap year. You don't like add another day to June or something like that. So the month that we add is added as Adar, right? So now the question, and that's the question that will be unpacked in our Gemara, but here we have the introduction of it. Which Adar is the real Adar? Will the real Adar please stand up? Now, if we have 2 Adars, so Purim is supposed to happen in Adar. So which Adar should Purim happen in? So that's one question. Next question, and this is where this Mishnah starts from. In the old days, the system of deciding when to have a leap year was not automatically established mathematically. We now have a mathematical system. We can look at the calendar. We can see what's going to happen in next year, 50 years, 1,000 years, maybe not 1,000 years, because eventually we're going to need to do some adjustments. But we have a perpetual calendar. Hold on one second. So every rabbi needs one of these things, and this is a 150-year Jewish calendar, right? So it started. This one started in 1900, and it'll go until 2050. So they thought they were being so great. Are you kidding? In 2050, that's almost tomorrow. So they're going to need to create a whole new a book. But this is a book that gives you a running, a calculation of every date. What day of the week is it? What's the English date, and so on. So when people ask me about yard sites, or people ask me when the bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah, I always have to look at this book. Sylvia.
Yeah, when was this calendar developed?
When was our mathematical calendar developed?
Yeah.
Our mathematical calendar was developed in the middle of the 4th century.
Really? Okay.
About 350 CE, because the system that we were using, which depended on a court hearing testimony and then making a decision about when the new month would be, and then when we would make a leap year or not, that system was forbidden by the Christian Roman Empire. So at that point, we had to scramble, and we had to create a very sophisticated mathematical system that would be able to be used. And we've been using it for over 1,500 years. And it works pretty well. But it will eventually need to get readjusted, because there's always a little bit of slippage. So, but until that time, in the time of the Mishnah, everything was done live. Everything was done at the spur of the moment. And the decision about whether to make a leap year or not was very much in control of the court, and it was locally determined by conditions in the land of Israel. So in the land of Israel, spring and summer and fall and winter are not quite as defined as they are, in the temperate climates until recently, until climate warming. But they would go out and they would look and they would see what's going on with the harvests, what's going on with, they would look and see what was happening with the agricultural reality of their time, and they would decide, do we need to push another month into the calendar or not? So these kinds of decisions were made on the spot. When were they made? They were made throughout the time, but of the year, but they were mostly made toward the adjustment of Passover to be with spring. Passover needs to be the spring harvest festival, right? It needs to be the time when the barley harvest ripens, because that's when we have the Omer. That's when we start counting the Omer from Passover to Shavuot. So they would go out and see whether they needed to do this. There were other considerations that had to be brought to bear. So their decision could have happened at any day. So the Mishnah opens up with a case of they didn't make the decision until already 2 weeks of Adar had already happened, which meant that everybody was assuming that this was going to be a regular year, and they already celebrated Purim. They already celebrated Purim on the 14th of Adar and on the 15th of Adar. And then all of a sudden, 2 days later, the High Court, the Sanhedrin, came out with a decision. You know what? We're putting in another Adar. We have to extend this year and make it into a leap. So that's where our Mishnah starts. If they had read the Megillah in the first Adar, and then an extra month was added, what do they do? So the Mishnah says they must read it in the second Adar. Even though they read it already, Purim, according to this, the straightforward reading is, it must be observed in the second Adar, not the first Adar. Okay, which is a little counterintuitive, right? Because if you think about it, if they had made no decision, so the Adar that just happened or the Adar that we're in right now, that's the real Adar, right? So if they make a decision to extend the month, to extend the year, they're adding another month. So that added month is an added month, right? It's appended to the year. You would think that the added month is kind of a secondary month, and that the first month is the real month. And yet, what the Mishnah says here is the opposite, right? That the second month that they just thought of adding is actually the real Adar for Purim. And they have to read the Megillah again. Okay, then we have the second part of the Mishnah. The second part of the Mishnah is a general observation. And it says there's no difference between the first Adar and the second Adar, except with regard to reading Megillah and gifts of the poor. Right? So look at, Beryl, you still there?
Yep.
Thank you. Let's look at note 26.
26. One who performs these mitzvot in the first Adar has not fulfilled his obligation. Rashi. However, in regard to other mitzvot, if one performed them in either month, one has discharged one's duty.
Okay.
The Gemara discusses this further.
So we have two mitzvot mentioned here, reading Megillah and gifts to the poor. What other mitzvot could we be thinking? So we have to remember there are 4 Purim mitzvot. The mitzvot of reading Megillah and giving gifts to the poor, that's called Matanot Le'Evyonim. Then we've got the famous mitzvah that we use all the time in our shul as a fundraiser. What's that? Mishloach Manot, Shalach Manas, giving gifts to each other. That's different than giving to the poor. That's giving to your friends, giving to your neighbors, right? That's what we do when we make all these big bags, give goodies to people in the shul. And the last one is Su'udah, to have a festive meal. So now this Mishnah seems to say we insist that between the first Adar and the second Adar, there's a difference in that the reading of the Megillah has to be in the second Adar, and giving gifts to the poor has to be in the second Adar. But apparently there's no difference between the first Adar or the second Adar with regard to the other two. If you had, let's say, again, take the beginning part of this Mishnah. Let's say they didn't decide to have a second Adar until after you had your Purim meal. You had a big Purim party. You had your Purim carnival. You have to have the Purim carnival again in the second Adar? Apparently not. If you gave Shalach Manos, if you gave gift baskets to your friends and to all the shul members in the first Adar, you have to do it in the second Adar? Apparently not. But if you read Megillah in the first Adar, because this is part of what you were doing, you thought it was Purim, right? So you did the other parts of Purim. You gave gifts to the poor. You read Megillah in the first Adar? No, doesn't count. You have to do it in the second Adar again. So we're going to have to understand these distinctions between all of these both, and also we're going to have to understand exactly how the Mishnah is telling us to view these two months. I just want to point out as for later, this Ein Bain, which means there is no difference between. That's two words, Ein Bain, which is in our Mishnah at the last two lines. This is going to then set us up for the rest of our chapter. Is going to bring us into all kinds of non-Purim topics, all united by this little phrase. There's no difference between A and B except C. That's going to be like a running list of things, so it's going to bring us into all kinds of other topics. But we're going to have to hold on for a while until we get there. Okay, so Bella, you ready to start reading the Gemara?
Gemara. The Gemara notes that since Mishnah differentiates between the two Adars only with regard to reading the Megillah and gifts the poor, it implies, but with regard to the series of 4 portions, both this one, the first Adar, and the other one, the second Adar, are the same. That is, if one reads the 4 portions in either the first or second Adar, one has fulfilled one's obligation.
Okay, so this is the Arba Parshiot, the 4 Torah portions. So look at note 27, please.
Note 27. During and just prior to the month of Adar, 4 special portions of the Torah are read. The portions are
Shkalim,
which deals with the half shekel per capita tax, which paid for the purchase of communal offerings, Zachor, which sets forth the commandment to exterminate Amalek, Parah, which discusses the laws of
Para Aduma,
the red cow,
Hodesh,
which describes the commandments of Rosh Chodesh and the month of Nisan. The Mishnah below teaches when each portion is read.
So we have what's called 4 different preparatory portions, and these portions are keyed to getting us ready to the new fiscal year. The temple, when it stood, had a fiscal year that began in Nisan, not on Rosh Hashanah in the fall. The fiscal year began in Nisan because Nisan is actually the first month of the Jewish year, right? We've talked about this many, many times. And therefore, Adar, which is the month that is Purim is in, is actually the last month of the Jewish year. And that's why it becomes the leap year month. It's the last month, and then when we need an extra month, we just add it on, we tack it on to the end of the year. So that's the logic for that. But the getting ready for Nisan required a lot of different preparations. One was to make sure that everybody paid their taxes in time so that we had enough money in the temple coffers to buy the daily sacrifices that had to be given on behalf of the whole nation. and the upkeep of the temple and so on and so forth. So we had that kind of thing, and we had also the idea of purifying oneself so that one could come to the temple, because on Passover in Nisan, we have our first pilgrimage festival of the year, and everybody is supposed to come to the temple. You can't come to the temple if you're ritually impure, so get yourself pure by then. And we have also things that have to do with Purim. It's the idea of wiping out Amalek. That's Haman, right? So that's, remember what Amalek did. Haman was considered a vestige of Amalek because we didn't do a good enough job, and we paid the price by having Haman try to destroy us. So these are the four things. Shkalim is getting the half shekel tax. Zachor is remembering Amalek before Purim. Then you have HaChodesh, which tells, then you have Para, which talks about purification. And then you have HaChodesh, which celebrates the new month of Nisan. So these four Torah portions are key to the calendar. They're key to getting ready for Purim, and then for Nisan and for Pesach. So what happens if we do a leap year? Then all of a sudden, our preparations for Pesach, we didn't know we weren't going to have a Nisan now. We thought we were going to have a regular year. So we're reading the Torah every Shabbat with these special Torah portions leading up to Pesach, and then all of a sudden, Nisan is pushed off a month. So what do we do about the Torah readings that we read? Do they count or not? So now it seems that what we're saying is, okay, if you read them in the first Adar, it's good enough. Yeah, Stuart.
You may have answered this question before, but we now have the Torah readings are in sync with the solar calendar, right? So, from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, we read the entire cycle from
right.
Simchat Torah, I guess, to Simchat
right.
Torah. So when you have Adar, a second Adar, how do you make up for that?
So that's where we have sometimes we have double Torah portions on a Shabbat. So when we have extra Shabbatot, we don't have those double Torah portions. We split them up. We have more Torah portions than we have in a regular year.
I see.
So in a regular year, in order to be synchronized, as you point out, in order to be able to actually finish within a year, we sometimes have to read more than one Torah portion. So
and these that we read in the first Adar are
these are additions to the weekly Torah portion.
Right.
These are extra little reading. They're not a full Torah portion.
We don't do them in the second Adar.
If we know that there's a second Adar, they're done in the second Adar. The problem in this situation was that the system was that it was all ad hoc. So we didn't know there was going to be a second Adar until it was too late. We already read some of these Torah portions. But let's not confuse the Torah. These Torah portions are additional to the weekly Torah portion.
Right.
Okay? Yeah. So that's the thing. Now, what you're asking now, I didn't think of that question. If we already doubled up some of these Torah portions, what are we going to do for the last month of Adar, for this extra month of Adar? What do we do for reading the Torah? Apparently, what we would do is we would read the Torah portion again.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good question.
I think as a practical matter, the doubled up portions are in the second half of the year, aren't they?
They're in a few places. They're in a few different places. They're spread out because the adjustments are made for certain kinds of synchronizations. So we had, for instance, in Israel, they didn't double up portions, and we did in the summertime because they kept up, because we had holidays on Shabbat and they didn't, because our second day holiday was on Shabbat. So we ended up needing to double up portions and they didn't. But sometimes, so it happens in a number of different places. When we, for instance, Vayakel Pekudei is in the wintertime. So, so that's a double portion. Okay.
And as a matter of modern practice, this is really taking a step aside from the Gemara for a minute. We observe Purim we predict now decades and centuries in advance. So we observe Purim in Adar.
Sheni. Right.
Yeah.
Follow,
Right. Okay.
we follow what the Mishnah here is saying, which is that
Yeah.
we should do it in the second Adar. Yes, but we'll see as we go on that was actually a matter of some a dispute. Not everybody had that idea in the beginning. That's what we finally decided on. Okay.
It's a special interest to me because I have yard site in Adar for my father, so I'm always
right. There's always that perpetual question.
Right.
Yep. All right. So now, Beryl, you'll be happy to know that we made it to 6b3.
Okay. Based on this inference, the Gemara notes that our Mishnah is at variance with the opinions of 3 Tananim recorded in a Baraita.
Okay, so let's just understand that we've got a Mishnah and we've got Baraita. Baraita means external teaching that didn't make it to the Mishnah, but they are from the same period of time, and they reflect teachings by the same community of scholars, more or less. So what we now see is that the Mishnah is an incomplete record of all of the discussions on the topic. The Mishnah is only reflecting one particular opinion, but guess what? We still have records that weren't included in the Mishnah of other contentious opinions. Let's see.
Who is the author of our Mishnah? It is neither Tanakama of the following Baraita,
So wait 1 second. Tanakama means the first teacher. That means we don't quite know who the first teacher is. It's anonymous, but what their first opinion recorded in the text is the first teacher. So that's Tanakama.
nor Rav Eliezer, son of Rav Yosei, nor Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, for it is taught in a Baraita, if they had read the Megillah in the first Adar, and subsequently an extra month of Adar was added to the year, they must read the Megillah again in the second Adar, because all the mitzvot that apply in the second Adar can apply in the first Adar as well, except for reading the Megillah. Rav Eliezer, son of Rav Yossi, says, they do not have to read the Megillah again in the second Adar, because all the mitzvot that apply in the second Adar apply in the first. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says in the name of Rav Yossi, they must even read it again in the second Adar, because all the mitzvot that apply in the second Adar do not apply in the first Adar. And all these Tananim agree regarding Tanaim agree in regard to eulogizing and fasting that they are prohibited on both this month, the first Adar, and the other month, the second Adar.
Okay, so it's getting more and more complicated here. So we have three opinions here. The first is an anonymous opinion that's called the first teacher, the Tanakama. Then we have an opinion of Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yossi, and then we have Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel in the name of Rabbi Yossi. So 3 opinions, and the scenario is exactly the same scenario as in our Mishnah. The leap year was not declared until after these people celebrated Purim. What do we do? So the first teacher says they must read the Megillah in the second Adar. That actually sounds like our Mishnah. We're going to have to see if there's any difference, because all the mitzvot that apply in the second Adar can apply in the first Adar as well. Right? They must read the Megillah in the second Adar. Shekol mitzvot shenagot b'sheni nagot b'rishon. That doesn't sound so good, right? But look at the note. The note says this rule will be explained later. Okay, let's hold on. Except for reading Megillah. reading Megillah cannot be read in the first Adar. Okay, it sounds a little bit like our Mishnah, but we'll see that it's a little different. And the next one says, no, the first Adar is fine. The first Adar, they read Megillah in the first Adar, great. That's terrific. So that sounds like he's saying that this first Adar counts as the right Adar. Then the last one, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says they must read it again in the second Adar, because all of the mitzvot that apply in the second Adar do not apply in the first Adar. So this sounds a little more broad than just reading Megillah. But we'll have to unpack all of this. So there's three statements. And then we have consensus. Consensus is that if we're trying to see which one is the real Adar, and we have disputes about whether it's the first one or the second one, nevertheless, all of these sages agree we give a little bit of recognition to each Adar. In what sense? That on the 14th and the 15th of Adar, either the first Adar or the second Adar, both of them, you're not allowed to engage in public mourning. You have to have some element of joy. Right? We say that Adar is a month of rejoicing. Purim is a happy holiday. So even if Purim is not going to be celebrated until the second Adar, everybody agrees that in the first Adar, you don't go into eulogizing and fasting. It's got to be, a day, the 14th and the 15th have to be days, even in the first Adar, that are not excessively mournful, right? Not excessively sad. Okay. So there's some kind of recognition that both Adars participate in the same nature. Okay. Before explaining
why the ruling of our Mishnah does not conform with any opinions in the Baraita, the Gemara first seeks to clarify the Baraita. The opinion of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel is the same as the opinion of the Tanna Kama.
Right. So the Gemara is asking, and we don't have to go through the long note, in what way exactly is Rabban Gamliel to be distinguished from the Tanna Kama? The Tanna Kama says you have to read Megillah in the second Adar, and it doesn't count in the first Adar. So Rabban Gamliel also says you have to read Megillah in the second Adar. What exactly is the difference of opinion between the Tanna Kama and Rabban Shimon Gamliel? Okay.
The Gemara answers, Rav Papa said, there is disagreement between them over the series of 4 portions. For the Tanna Kama holds that properly the 4 portions should be read in the second Adar. But if they are read in the first Adar, that is sufficient. The exception is reading the Megillah, in which case the rule is that even if they had read the Megillah in the first Adar, they must read it again in the second Adar. And Rav Eliezer, son of Rav Yossi, holds that even the reading of the Megillah should be performed in the first Adar. And Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel holds that even in regard to the series of 4 portions, if they had read the 4 portions in the first Adar, they must read them again in the second Adar.
Okay. So the conclusion here is again to the 4 portions. If we look back at the beginning comment of our Gemara, it says, but with regard to the series of 4 portions, both this one and the other one are the same. Right? You see that at the bottom of 6b2. Right? So according to reading our Mishnah, it sounds like if you read the 4 portions in the first Adar, it's good enough. When they added a second Adar, if you read it already beforehand, you didn't know, it's good enough to read it in the first Adar. So that seems to be the opinion here of the Tanna Kama. We're going to have to come back and see why is it not the Tanna Kama who is our Mishnah's teacher. We're going to get to that soon. But now the differentiation is being made between Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel and the Tanna Kama. Tanakama says Megillah has to be read in the second Adar, but I don't care when you read the 4 portions. They can be read in the first Adar too. And Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, are you kidding? The first Adar does not count at all. The second Adar is the real Adar for all purposes. And therefore, even the 4 portions that we read in preparation for Purim and for Pesach, they need to be read specifically right before Nisan. Okay, we'll continue with this in 2 weeks. Next week is Shomrei Splash. Everybody's invited to have a wonderful time together. Some things are in person, some things are Zooming. Most of the things you just, sign in, but some things you need to register for. But we will not have Talmud Chevrah Shas next week. Sherilyn, yes.
This is a personal question because I'm totally confused. My uncle died Rosh Chodesh Adar 2. So I've been observing his yurtzeit when we only have 1 Adar on Rosh Chodesh Adar 1. What happens when we have 2? Do I do it on both days?
We'll have to deal with it later, not today.
Okay.
Okay, good. All right, Zygazint, everybody. See you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.